Hi, I'm Rebekah Reysen. Good to see you here with Jeremy Roberts, and we'd like to welcome you to the Chit Chat. Today, we have a very special guest named Michael Smith, who is a fantastic staff member at the Center for Student Success and First Year Experience. Let us tell you a little bit more about Michael. Michael Smith is an academic advisor serving freshman studies undeclared students with the last names L through Z, freshmen, and last names H through L, upperclassmen. Originally from Mobile, Alabama, he completed his BA in International Studies at the University of South Alabama in 2009. He completed his MA in Higher Education and Student Personnel at the University of Mississippi in 2011. Michael's returning to Ole Miss after serving students at LSU for over 4 years. He is passionate about helping students discover their strengths and identify opportunities to connect those strengths to potential academic majors and career fields. He also coordinates our Students First program designed to assist first generation students with the transition to college. Good to see you, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, we are excited to talk to you. So let's start off with talking about you and your role at the Center for Student Success.
Yeah, thanks. So the bio does a pretty good job of hitting the highlights, but I do like to talk a little bit about sort of what does it mean to be an academic advisor for freshman studies students. In that role, I work with students across a wide spectrum, from the students who want to do 20 different majors and are having trouble deciding, all the way to the students who have no clue what they're interested in, to even make a first step towards kind of figuring out their major. So it's a very wide range of students, and so that makes every interaction very unique. Every kind of conversation is very focused on trying to really dig into what their interests are. I often tell students I really encourage them to come in as frequently and as often and early as possible, so that we have plenty of time to talk about what they're interested in. I always like to talk about one student who he initially came in as a business, kind of interested in business, but then he kept being pulled into thinking about computer science, but was also kind of struggling with the math classes for that major. And so we went back and forth, business, computer science, business, computer science, and then I was able to sort of introduce the idea of doing management information systems, which is sort of computer science meets business. You're sort of the kind of the head honcho on the technical side for businesses, and so that really piqued his interest, because it really helped marry his interest and passion for both. And so that was a positive conversation, but it took several meetings over the semester for us to kind of land on that, because he was really committed one way or the other. He wasn't really looking for something in the middle. But then once we got there, he felt pretty confident with it. And so that's oftentimes a lot of the conversations are also around students who are maybe afraid to choose a major. So I might advise them towards the same major or direction a couple of times, but they're scared to make a bad choice when it comes to major. And so I always want to, especially for the folks that I work with who are kind of rising sophomores and higher, they have to declare if they have 45 credit hours. And so a lot of them are nervous about that must declare situation, kind of making a mistake. But oftentimes, it's just because you've declared a major doesn't mean that, you can't change your mind later. That's how I always try to pitch it to them, while also acknowledging that it's still a big decision. And I also get to work with students who are unable to declare their major due to their GPAs. And that's always it's always a unique conversation with every one of those as well, because many of them have ideas about what they want to do. And so it's all about trying to make sure that it's the right fit for, their motivation and ability, but also, how to get the GPA up high enough to where they can actually declare. That's always it's a challenge, but I enjoy those challenges. Yeah, so it's some interesting conversations, but I would just say no two advising meetings are ever the same. Again, even with the same student. So that definitely keeps me on my toes, and just trying to figure out what's what the student wants, but also what's in their best interests.
Mhm. Mhm. So tell us a little bit about your career development and how you got started in student affairs to be able to help students, basically like what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. So going way back to undergraduate,
Mhm.
I had originally started off as a biology major, thinking I was wanting to go into microbiology. I got to my sophomore year, hit organic chemistry, and it was not a positive hit. It really kind of shook my confidence in that direction. I was also somebody who was very involved on campus in a lot of different organizations. I was involved in student government, orientation leaders, in Greek life, and in several other kind of organizations on campus. So I was always kind of had that involvement side. And I worked a lot with some of the full-time staff members on campus, who oversaw student involvement. And kind of in my senior year, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step?
Mhm.
And I was just chatting with one of my really good mentors, and Sally Cobb, and she was just like, "Well, I'm not sure if you've been thinking about this, but you could do work in higher education, work with college students." She just kind of like put that in my ear, and I was like, "Oh, you can get a degree for that. You can get
Mhm.
for that." And so that really started me on my journey towards finding a path forward in that direction. And it took me, I did an internship with our Dean of Students office at the time, um, that oversaw a lot of different functional areas, including disability services. It included programming, involvement. It also included Greek life, and I got a chance to go to a conference with the Greek life person.
Mhm.
And in that conference, I went to all the advisor sessions and really found out quick that if I wanted to to really make the most of my education and experience, I really had to go somewhere else for my master's degree, someplace that was not South Alabama. And so that's how I sort of found the University of Mississippi. And here I had a connection to a friend who was a year ahead of me, and she had really kind of promote. She was like, I love being here. Come visit. I'll show you around. And when you get to campus, you just fall in love with it. And so I got accepted to the master's program, and started off with an assistantship in student conduct. So that was a very sort of interesting start. And I did some practicum experiences in international programs, which is, kind of did more. They had what was it called? It was like coffee chats. It was
Mhm.
kind of a weekly meetup for all the international students. And then the other one I did was actually with Dewey Knight.
Mhm.
I sort of did first year experience, got to be the main instructor for one of the EDHE 105 classes that semester. Um, and it was just a really great experience. I've always enjoyed teaching that class because it's just such a wonderful welcome to the university and helping get students connected to resources.
Mhm.
But that really kind of solidified my focus in kind of what I wanted to do. I had my first job opportunity after graduating was at Louisiana State University,
Mhm.
and that job was student conduct, but it was also advising the student government association there. So it was allegedly a 50-50 job responsibility with the different roles, but it sometimes felt more like 75-75. And it was at a time in student conduct when it was feeling, very kind of in the process of becoming a more legalized process. People were involving, it wasn't really as much of a educational process as it had been when I started. So after a couple of years in that role, I moved into still continued to be the advisor for student government, but moved into working with student advocacy. So really working with students in crisis or of concern, and helping them get connected to the resources that they needed. In that role, it really did feel like I was putting out all the fires, and that was also pretty overwhelming to me too. But it also introduced me to academic advising, because one of the people on our care team, which was sort of the group that met every week to talk about students of concern, she was in charge of one of the advising areas, and oftentimes I'd kind of talk to her about sort of what that was like, and that's how I ended up transitioning to advising in my last year there. And that was the right field for me, 100%. Just kind of helping see students and just kind of talking to them about their kind of interests and their goals, and helping them, kind of get to the end of the line. That was sort of what we did for the advising side. We were helping them, with graduation and talking about internships and things like that. And then, so that's when the opportunity came up here to come in as an academic advisor. I was really excited to take that chance. It gave me an opportunity to kind of what I call come back home. And it, but it also allowed me to kind of work with students in that first year. And because everything is so exciting and new, and you get to have those conversations and see those reactions from students all the time. And so I that's what I've really enjoyed. And so been here 4.5 years now. So just excited to see kind of what comes next for me.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit and talking about the Students First program and the first generation students, we'd love to hear more about the programming and how you actually work with them. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do in the University of Mississippi for first generation students?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I always like to say, there's a ton of work on campus being done by a ton of different people. So I'm just one kind of small part of that machine. But for the part that I do get to do, I get to work with our incoming freshmen, and I've also started reaching out to our incoming transfer students in order to let them know that as an incoming first generation college student, that number one, they're not alone, that there are so many students, faculty, and staff that are here to see them be successful. And whether that's as a first generation college student or as a, just somebody supporting them, it's important to make that connection as early as possible. One thing I like to share is I am not first generation college student, but my mom was. And my first week of classes, I called her, kind of at the end of the week, just to let her know how the first week of classes went. Was sort of venting about something. And when we got done talking, she said, I really wish, your grandparents, her parents, could have had that type of conversation and talk with her. They were so proud of her and excited for her to be in college, but they didn't really know much more other than they drove her down to move-in day, waved goodbye, and said, we'll see you in November for Thanksgiving. And so she was really having to be resourceful on her own, being her own best advocate, and that she really wished there had been somebody there to help support her on that journey. And so I was really inspired by that story, just because, I didn't want to take her support for granted.
Mhm.
Really like carry on that torch on her behalf. And so I've had the opportunity to connect with students and their parents and other family, um, and it's just been a great opportunity, especially during orientation. We actually, this summer orientation is the first time that we've had our own separate session.
Mhm.
It's been an optional session, but we've had some participation there, and it's been both parents and students. So it's a good kind of group conversation there. Um, but there have also been, students who came by themselves and, are just sort of looking for connection to somebody and support in kind of navigating college. Um, I also teach our freshman year experience, EDHE 105, for first gen college students, as long as they're not in any of the programs or majors that have their own class, or that class doesn't count as an elective. So I reach out to those students during orientation, to let them know about the class, and then they kind of get back in touch with me. So far, that class is, it's designed to create sort of as safe a space as possible,
Mhm.
to be vulnerable about your first generation student experience, and to, kind of ask those questions. I think, there are some things that can overlap with a lot of, even people who, they're second or third generation Ole Miss students. Their grandparents went to school here. And so, you know they may be kind of nervous about asking questions too, but I do think with kind of first generation students, some of them come in and just really are nervous to show that vulnerability, because it might be seen as a weakness, and so I do try to dispel that from the very beginning. I also try to dispel any notions that they don't belong there. um, we know that when it comes to uh, retention, for our incoming students, that a sense of belonging is one of those like key criteria, to help make sure that they move from the freshman year into their sophomore year and beyond. And so the kind of idea that being a first generation college student can be isolating definitely doesn't help with that sense of belonging. So the idea of having a class where they can connect with other first gen students, even if it's maybe not best friend level, they still have some colleagues, we can use that term, uh, in the class, to have some understanding, and people who might be able to, kind of appreciate the things that they're going through. And then the other kind of things that we have, there's a student organization on campus that is called the First Gen Student Network. It
Mhm.
was started in the Honors College, I believe it was a couple of years ago, but this upcoming year they are expanding to the whole campus. So I've always wanted to have a like student-led aspect to our efforts. And it's been super exciting to work with the Honors College um, and the student leader in charge of that group, to try to promote their programming and efforts. Because honestly, hearing me talk about things is, it's good information, but I don't think students necessarily are 100% tuned in listening, unless another student says it. So
Right.
um, also true with parents. I feel
Yeah.
like parents give you advice and you're like, I don't know if that's right. And then your friend gives you the exact same advice, but it's so much more valid for some reason. So
Mhm. And I know the Center for Student Success, we're all about helping students be successful and however they define those goals. We're just curious. You've taught classes, you've met with a lot of students. You also teach the EDHE 101 class for freshmen on probation. What advice do you have for students, kind of in general, um, in terms of being successful in college?
There are some pretty basic things that you may have heard before. Things like making sure that you're going to class every day, making sure that you talk to your instructor. That for the most part, the instructor is not a big scary boogie person. That they're here to see you be successful, and but they can't necessarily read your mind to figure out if and how you're struggling.
Mhm.
um, and to I do think it's important to be a like a really good listener too, so that when you do ask those questions and you're given the advice, that you're really taking in that advice and finding ways to incorporate it into the plan. I also think you know especially for the first semester even, it's important to take your midterm grades seriously. I do think, especially with classes that have drop test grades, a lot of students will just say, oh, it's fine. I just have to make a 100 on my final. Even though, you've been making 80, 70, 60 on the other tests. It's possible, but, have you really taken the time to sit down and evaluate how you're studying and how you're going over the material to make sure you'll get that 100 final? And so I do think sometimes we don't take those midterm grades seriously, and that can that can hinder our ability to change course. And So really paying attention to your midterm grades, and then also making sure that you're not afraid to ask questions. One thing I always say to my class and to my students, that may be the 1,000th time I've been asked that question, but for the most part, it's the first time you've asked me. So I will always approach your question as though it's the first time I've ever answered it. Now, sometimes students will go and, they'll try to get a different response from you after the first answer. And, that can sometimes be challenging, but for the most part, even if somebody's doing that, I'll still keep it plain and simple to the first response. So make sure you take your midterms seriously, and that you're not afraid to ask questions, because we're not keeping a ledger of every single question somebody asks a student to then deduct those points at some point. We're just here to see you be successful.
Cool. Well, we have a lightning round where we like to ask each guest a little bit more about their experiences in college. So buckle your seatbelt. We've got a few questions for you.
So the first question we typically ask is, let's go back to your freshman year of college. Paint us a picture of what Michael's freshman year of college looked like.
Oh man. Okay. So I will say I was one of those sort of, it felt like a little bit of a reverse curve student. So my first couple of semesters of college, I had really strong like GPAs. I was taking all the classes and all the sciences, and you know, I was kind of being that successful person as best as I could. And then when I hit but really it was when I hit my that first sophomore semester, when I was in organic chemistry, and it just kind of rocked my world. That was well, it really shook my confidence. And I don't regret choices that I've made, because I wouldn't be where I am today without those, that path that I've taken. But I often will reflect on, I wish I had had somebody who could have either prompted me to maybe try again with the organic chemistry, or connected me to, like, there weren't YouTube channels that were dedicated to, reviewing material. Have a supplemental instructor in the class, and I did not go to those sessions. And so that was And I think a lot of that was because I was afraid to seem, I didn't want to ask a stupid question because I was struggling with the class. But I kind of turned around a little. I felt like when you look back on it, kind of feels like I turned around on organic chemistry way too early. I probably should have tried some different things before finally, kind of throwing in the towel. But again, I wouldn't be where I am without that. I ended up focusing on international studies, which was really where my passion and interests were before coming to college too. I enjoyed doing Model United Nations. I enjoyed, current events and politics, and just sort of, those were some awesome classes that I got to take, and conversations and discussions. So again, I don't regret the change, but if I had been my academic advisor and I had come in for either talking about midterm grades or to come in for advising for the next semester, I probably would have tried to have a little bit more of a intervention conversation about it. Because, it kind of felt like I was on my own a little bit because, international studies, they didn't really know or understand anything that had to do with the biology, and biology didn't really know. We had faculty advisors, so the faculty advisors rarely knew what was, kind of going on in the other departments. And so, you didn't really get that, kind of support or referral type of thing. And so that was definitely something that kind of tripped me up there. I did end up, overall, but from the freshman year, I was very much the kind of overachiever. I did have a situation where in the second semester, I had been up all night studying for my chemistry 2 final exam. So I did the thing you're not supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell asleep because I did not stay up all night. I passed out on the couch. The test was supposed to start at 8 a.m. and I woke up it was like 8:30 or 8:40. And we had like a 2-hour time block. And so I'm like rushing. I'm not much, obviously I'm not much of a runner, but I did my best jog as I could. And I got all the way to where the test was supposed to be, and there wasn't a soul in the classroom.
Wow.
And so I was like, what's going on? So then I decided to go to his office, the instructor's office. And apparently everybody had already finished the test. And so he came back, and I was like, is there any way I can do this test, even if it's for like the last 40 minutes of the test block? And he said, well, I let people leave with copies of the test. And I said, do I look like somebody who had the chance to do that? Like the copy of the test? He was still super firm about it. That class, we did have a drop test grade. And so I left. I was frustrated because he wouldn't let me even try to attempt the test. And so I took a day to cool off, went back the next day, and just kind of sat down with him and said, hey, is there anything that I can do? Is there any consideration? And what we came to was he let me use my drop test grade that was supposed to be for the other 3 tests. He let me use it on the final. It was very very kind and courteous to me. And I, ended up with a C in that class, which was probably, maybe a little bit of my start to the lack of confidence in some chemistry, but, I was just glad that he didn't fail me. And so I sent him, a thank you email for his kindness. But yeah, I missed a final. It's a 0 out of 10, would not do again. Do not stay up all night.
Right.
That's my best advice.
Yeah.
And I was also not like super, I was not a super social person my freshman year, which was probably why my grades were pretty decent. It's because I spent a lot of time doing the homework and the lab reports and getting ready for the tests and everything. It doesn't mean I was like locked up in my room all the time, but it was definitely, I spent more time in there than kind of hanging out and kind of going out at night.
Mhm. Well, our final question for you on today's show is, have you ever had a mentor or a professor whom you found to be inspirational for you, that maybe got you started on your journey, maybe helped you with a particular class like you were just talking about? But has there ever been anybody who has stood out in your mind throughout your entire college career?
Throughout the whole thing, it was probably more Sally Cobb. She was the one who was very much the advisor for many of the student organizations I was in. She was also kind of overseeing student involvement kind of area in student affairs.
Mhm.
And she was the one that kind of put me on to, this could be a career direction for you. And she also heard me whine and complain about so many, academic and non-academic things. And she was always a kind of a great person to vent to and to bounce things off of. And, I owe a lot of my journey in undergrad to her.
Mhm.
And just her willingness to, I don't think she ever really like turned me away. She probably should have, but she let me sit down, and that's the type of professional I've always wanted to be. Is somebody who people feel comfortable coming to talk to about what's going on. Um, and yeah, she's I thought they should have named the student center after her. I mean, that's when that was probably the level of esteem that I hold her in. So um I don't know, maybe they'll do it eventually. But she touched so many lives, and she made us all feel like we were the kind of only one in the room. So uh definitely a mentor and a role model.
Okay. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. We really do appreciate what you do for students here at the University of Mississippi, for first generation students, for academic advising. You've helped us with many questions that we've had, students that walk into our doors and ask academic advising questions. We know that we can count on any of our advisors over in Martindale to help out with stuff, but you've actually gone above and beyond for some of our students, and it shows with your passion. So we do appreciate that. Um, this has been a great episode of the Chit Chat. We will look forward to many more things with first generation coming up for the fall and the spring semester of this new year. So for Rebekah, Reysen, I'm Jeremy Roberts. Thank y'all so much and have a good one. We'll see you next time.